Good evening and welcome. It is Thursday night. It is 8 p.m. Eastern. Pardon me. I'm so zonked that I'm having calendar issues. It is the Thursday night podcast with the young, cool, fresh kids are calling ASTV. And I'm joined by Trevor and Rami tonight. Trevor, how are you?
Fantastic.
Technical issues aside.
Yeah, no. Nothing happened. Nothing at all happened.
That's true. Yeah, nothing exists before the show starts. Rami, how are you?
I'm happy to be here. Doing great, gentlemen.
That's a good one. It usually for the last few weeks we've had something to be positive about when we started, but this week a little bit of a post-mortem for us, a little bit of an incisive look into what's gone on. Real Madrid 5 goals to Liverpool's 2. Trevor, it started so well, didn't it?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I was working for the first half, the good half, and I got back to listen to the proceedings, and everything fell apart. And it was one of those things where the commentary team painted a very bleak picture of what was going on as I was listening, of just the complete shambles that was upon everything at Anfield. And I was, I came in at just the worst time, which was, not fun.
I was the exact same. Missed the first half, had to catch it up later, and then pushed my way through the second half. But Rami, like the 2 goals we scored, I mean, the Nunes goal was an absolute cracker. We looked like we were on it, and then the wheels came off. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I feel like they sold us some false hopes and false dreams. I mentioned yesterday on the morning podcast, after we scored the first 2, it felt like we were going to score 3 or 4 in the first half, and we were just looking like the Liverpool of old, and we finally beat our bogeyman in Real Madrid and all of this. But it was a quick crash back down to reality. And after Vinicius scored that first goal, I was like, okay, yeah, we were like, I wasn't expecting to keep a clean sheet anyways, doing all this coping. And when they scored the second one, I was like, oh, okay, 2-2, we can do this. We take it in the halftime, and then the third one went in, and that's when I started to get worried. I was like, okay, yeah, we kind of fell apart mentally after that. And then the fourth and the fifth came, and it was just a miserable night. I think I said it yesterday, but like a lot of the frustration comes from just being up 2-0 and then getting all that hope and then coming back down to earth. Like if you told me before the match it ended 5-2, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. But it was just that hope, getting that hope, that 2-0, and then just coming crashing back down.
Trevor, because the thing about it is that if it had been maybe 2-2 with them scoring a last minute equalizer in a hard fought game, we would have been disappointed, but we would have still gone into the second half, or the second leg rather, thinking, we are in this. But it was a shambles from almost the first whistle in the second half, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that's the rough part, because you can always kind of fall back on that. All right, especially in Champions League, there's always that second leg hope, where there's been, especially with Liverpool, there's so many instances where they've pulled it back from the depths, and you're going, okay, I can hang my hat on this. But that entire second half, from the performances to the substitution patterns to just everything that went on, was just absolutely shambolic. It was an absolute mess. And there was a couple times where I'm just going, do I even want to keep this on? Because am I going to listen to 6? Am I going to listen to 7? Is it just going to be something where I'm going to want to drive off the road at this point? It was not an enjoyable auditory experience, that second half.
I'm just going to say a quick good evening to Brian and Alan M and Alan Walnut, our regulars that usually give us the great comments. Miracles can happen, but the impossible takes so much longer. Here's what I want to talk to about tonight. Okay, so as supporters, as sports fans, Rami, we're always looking to point the finger of blame. That's what we do when things go wrong, and then we always point the finger of fortune when things go right. But the question I have tonight is, who do we blame for this? Who's in charge of the pattern of results and performances that we've seen this season? There was a lot. There was a lot of talk about Pep Linder's book at the start of the season that was going to come back to bite us. There's probably a lot of causation versus correlation in that, in how the season has panned out. But is Klopp ultimately to blame for how we've performed? He mentioned about, it's one result and it's one performance, but it's not one result and it's not one performance because it's been happening all season, and ultimately the book does stop with him, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I don't think 100% of the blame is on Klopp, but he's not completely innocent in this situation. Like you said, it's not a one-off. If you look at this whole season, from the Fulham game, first game of the season, a lot of things that we struggled with then, we're still struggling with now. You can point to things like, a lack of squad depth, no midfield reinforcements, a bunch of injuries, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, Klopp is the one, managing the squad and putting the 11 guys out there that he thinks are going to succeed. Trevor mentioned it earlier, the substitution patterns. That's not FSG's fault or whoever's fault. He's the one deciding those things. And, when we're down 3 goals and bringing in James Milner instead of, Naby Keita, who we haven't seen in a while, or Fabio Carvalho or whoever, I think the responsibility does lie on Klopp. Also, when you look at like the mentality of the team and the way they just really crumbled in the past 12 months, that's also on management. I'm never going to be the first to say Jurgen Klopp needs to go. For me, he can stay as much as he likes. But it's not on one person. And like as fans, like you say, we kind of try to find a scapegoat. After the Real Madrid game, everybody's like, "Oh, it's Joe Gomez's fault." I personally don't think so. Yeah, he was responsible for a few, maybe 1 or 2 of their goals, but at the end of the day, it's a combination of everything. It's a combination of the players just not being up for it. It's a combination of Klopp not doing the right things, and then it's a combination of the upper management of not supporting the team financially. So yeah, to point the blame on one person is I feel like very reductive, but that doesn't mean that anybody is innocent in the situation.
Now, here's why I chose the headline of Who's the Boss specifically for this, Trevor, because Rami is correct and Brian Shelton is correct and Alan Walnut is correct. We can't really point the finger of blame at any one person. But if this was Brendan Rodgers, we would all be pointing the finger at Brendan Rodgers and saying he's not good enough for Liverpool and he needs to go. And literally, the performance against Real Madrid in the second half was probably as bad as anything we'd had in Europe under Brendan Rodgers, who had a much significantly weaker team to play with than Jurgen Klopp has. So is Jurgen Klopp being protected almost by the aura of his greatness because he is a great manager and the success he's had? And are we all just hypocrites as supporters for not applying the same principles and the same standards to one manager versus another?
Well, yeah. And overlapping before I give my long-winded answer, yes, we are. The hypocrisy is oozing out of our pores. That is just from the jump, yes. But the thing with Klopp is he's kind of earned that a bit of leeway from his past successes. But there has to come a point where that ego and that my way or the highway kind of mentality and zero adaptability is something that all of us have been just screaming with a fucking megaphone this entire season of, yes, your team you're older, you're broken, there's things that need to be changed, there's things in just in-game situations where you need to make adaptive moves to both your opposition and the roster that you have at your disposal that you refuse to, on a weekly basis, work from. And when you're down 2 goals, 3 goals, and you're waving the white flag, what does that show? What does that bring to What is that? And for all of the people that were trying to recruit coming in, all right, you want to get, you still want to live on that that fairy tale cloud that Jude Bellingham's coming in the summer. That second half is going to be your fucking promo video to him. Oh yeah, just if we're losing, we're just gonna just throw in the towel. You know what? Don't worry about it. We're just gonna let things go, and then we'll get them next time. We'll give them the good old college try. What? That's yeah, and I understand what Brian's saying. He doesn't solve anything alone, but he's the pathway to getting all of these problems fixed with a lot of things. And if your recruitment policy is based on winning, and when it shows where you're struggling, and your path to fixing that struggling is just to give up, who are you recruiting then?
Rami, in terms of how we react to things like this, I think it's just like, it's an interesting thing just to look at. Is here is, I believe, the team that played against Real Madrid in this the second game, not second leg, I think, because it was group stages, wasn't it? In 2014, after he dropped Gerrard and etc. for the poor performance in the game at the Bernabeu, and that's an appalling team, really, when you look at it on paper, compared to what we had the other night, which is maybe Bajcetic aside because he's young. That is a levels better team. So should we be expecting more from Klopp?
Yeah. In a sense, he might be suffering from his own success because he did reach those high standards. And who knows, maybe that was an anomaly, winning the Premier League and the Champions League with the resources he was provided. You could look at it that way. And like I said, maybe he's suffering from that success because now that's the expectation. But, I still feel like, he is responsible to a certain extent, but like I mentioned earlier, like he's only responsible so much. I don't know. I want to go back to what you're saying about Brendan Rodgers. It's like, yeah, but Brendan Rodgers didn't do anything that Klopp did. So I feel like he's earned more of time than necessarily the same amount of time we would have given Brendan Rodgers. Simply because of the fact, like I said, I feel like he's just suffering from his own success. I will say this though, that if, next season, let's say we spend a decent amount, we get Jude in, we get in whoever else in the summer, and then we come out next season and we're still playing the same way and we still look lifeless and lost and all these things, then I would agree at that point we need to start evaluating Klopp's position. But until then, I want to give him the chance to rebuild. He hasn't really had to do that once in his career. And more than just as a Liverpool fan, I kind of want to see him as like a football fan, how he does it, how he approaches it. Because he hasn't really had to do that with Mainz or Dortmund. So I want to see how he approaches a rebuild. And if, like I said, if we come out next year and we still look the same way, then some difficult conversations I feel like will need to be had. But I just feel like it's too early right now. Klopp has enough credit in the bank. He has enough goodwill from just his achievements that we shouldn't use those achievements against him because, I feel like that's a bit unfair.
Well, here's the point I'm going to make, and it actually ties in with what Brian Shelton said, because that Stoke game came much longer after this Real Madrid game that we're referring to, because this Real Madrid game came a few months after we had just finished second to Man City and had our best league season in a long, long time, and we're literally one offside decision away from being champions. If we remember the corrupt referee onside offside Raheem Sterling goal against Manchester City. So we say Klopp has enough credit in the bank, which he does, but are our reactions a little bit more generous because we love Klopp? And Brendan Rodgers, for all his good on the training field, just kind of rubbed people up the wrong way an awful lot by how he behaved in the press. He comes across as not always a sincere person. But we turned on Brendan Rodgers by October of 2014, having sung his praises in May of 2014, and looked forward to what the future held, despite the fact that he'd lost Suarez to Barcelona and Sturridge to yet another injury, as we can all attest to that situation right now. But what my point is, we were quite prepared to point the finger at Brendan Rodgers May, June, July, it was 4 or 5 months after a fantastic season. Should we not be a little bit more critical of Jurgen Klopp right now for how we're playing this season?
Yeah, I think next, as Ryan was saying, next season is where we really need to kind of put the moorings down of whether or not Klopp is built for this rebuild, because this is what it is at this point. This is not a retooling. This is not a reloading. This is a rebuild, because there's a lot of positions and a lot of dead wood that needs to be moved out, and a lot of guys that need to have their roles changed within the squad. And he needs to either kind of break those loyalty chains that he has, or he just needs to make the realization on his own front that he can't and needs to go. Because I don't think that FSG will fire him unless he goes through a just disastrous spell, and by that point the club will be so broken that it will be just a kind of poison pill for whoever comes in.
Rami, just because I'm kind of playing devil's advocate tonight a little bit with Klopp, because the truth for every Liverpool fan, apart from the weirdos, is we want to see him come out of this slump and we want to see him succeed again. But Trevor makes a good point. He is not known for rebuilding a team. Are we prepared to suffer 5 more years? Because it took 5 years pretty much to build the Champions League and title-winning teams, when you think about it. Are we prepared to suffer 5 more years of a rebuild to get another great Klopp team? Or will we get impatient in year 2 of that rebuild, maybe?
Yeah, and that's a good question, and that remains to be seen. Personally, at least maybe this is more of a hope. I don't think it's going to take 5 years. I think we have enough pieces. You're not like, I feel like the first time you're kind of starting from zero. Now I feel like we have enough foundation and infrastructure to rebuild a team without it taking 5 years. But then that's the $1 million question. Like you said, are we going to see it out with Klopp like we did the first time? Just give him that time, or is it going to come a point in time where it's like this relationship has become too toxic? I think it was Brian mentioned in the chat, but if Klopp goes, then who comes in? Who are you going to realistically bring in that can do what Klopp does? I'm not saying there's no managers out there who are on his level, but it's very hard to bring somebody in and not take a step down. I mean, you look at Chelsea, they thought Graham Potter was the solution to all their problems, but who knows? It may be better off if they had just kept Tuchel. You know what I mean? It's just one of those situations where it's like it's just so murky, and the future is just so kind of scary and uncertain right now that we're kind of just like looking for any beacon to help us through that. And I feel like in this situation, it's like the evil is better than the one you don't. And right now, the evil we know is Klopp and all his issues. And right now, he does have a lot of issues, but at least he's the one we know, and the one that we trust, and the one who's earned our respect. And so in the meantime, I feel like I said, we need to give him that chance at that rebuild. And I think we do need to be a little bit patient. I don't think 5 years, but I think at the very least next season. But if we're still, like I said, if we're still coming out next season and nothing has changed, and we still just look lifeless and lost, it could get very very toxic very quickly.
Trevor, Alan Walnut mentions Nagelsmann. He says not to promote Linders, whereas a year ago we were all talking about he's probably the next in line. But let me still be devil's advocate again. Let me throw a name out there who we think could possibly, bearing in mind that if Klopp is gone, it means something's gone wrong. It means there's something wrong that needs to be fixed rather than he's gone out at the top. Thomas Frank.
He is a guy that I think is going to be a very coveted manager from a lot of big clubs, the way that Graham Potter was before Chelsea kind of poached him, because that Brentford side is a team that is definitely punching above their weight. And I the way Potter has struggled at Chelsea, and the way Eddie Howe is kind of coming back down to earth at Newcastle kind of gives me pause for Thomas Frank, because maybe it is a bridge too far for a guy that is working with a team that has kind of egos in check and works under a certain kind of financial structure. And there's some guys that are built for that level, and that step up may just be something that they can't handle. And I'm not saying that Thomas Frank wouldn't be a guy that couldn't particularly do that, but until the wheels entirely fall off the Klopp wagon, I don't want a guy that's completely unproven at this level.
Rami, though, do you think that that's like an albatross around their neck to constantly want to have somebody who is at that level? We don't have the finances of Chelsea formerly under Abramovich to be able to chop and change top quality managers. We certainly don't have the finances of City, who could probably do that after Pep Guardiola. But at the other hand, the thing with Eddie Howe and Graham Potter is that they don't play the style of soccer that Klopp plays, whereas Frank is almost an identikit manager for what Klopp does. Do you think if that ended up being the case, that there might be a smoother transition than if we had the next big English manager thing that Newcastle and Chelsea clearly went for?
Right. I think Thomas Frank would be a decent fit. If we're still under FSG at the time, he's already worked with the Moneyball system at Brentford, so we kind of know how that works, how to get the most out of the dollars that he gets. But I don't know. It's like you said, we won't really know until we bring somebody in. But it's very hard to say because it's just like Julian Nagelsmann is another example. Like, he's been at Bayern, but that's not the Premier League. Bayern wins the Bundesliga every season. We can bring him in, and he's a total flop. Sometimes I don't mean this to sound reductive, but I think managers get too much credit or too much blame. A lot of times it does really just come down to the players. And so sorry, I forgot where I was going with that. but yeah, I think for me personally, I don't, like you mentioned, we don't have a large margin of error. We don't have a lot of room to wiggle around with. So if the person after Klopp has to be the right hire, and like Trevor mentioned, if Klopp is gone, that means that something has gone utterly wrong and we're in shambles. So it has to be a person with a steady hand who can maneuver the club for that time. Whether that is Frank, whether he has the experience, I wouldn't mind giving him a shot, to be honest. But it could be Nagelsmann. It could be somebody like, Jose Mourinho. Who knows? It could be just somebody that, I don't hope it's Jose Mourinho, but it could be him, But like, yeah,
Rami, there's playing devil's advocate, and then there's playing devil's advocate there.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's playing devil's advocate, then playing the devil.
Devil. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. It could be anybody, and they could be hit or miss. It's just I think more importantly, what I'm concerned about is the backroom staff. I think that's very crucial. I think Klopp has kind of, not necessarily the backroom staff, but the upper management. We've lost Michael Edwards, our data guy, stuff like that. If we bring in people to replace them, I think we can be just as successful with a different manager as we were under Klopp. But it's just a matter of, like I said, making sure the right hires are in the right places.
So just as a nice, neat segue there, and I don't mean those crappy two-wheeled things that nobody bought, that gets us around from A to B. I think Rami is correct, Trevor, in that the manager is never entirely responsible for the good results and never entirely to blame for the bad ones. The players shoulder a lot of it. So with that in mind, my question to you, Trevor and Rami, is, do we have to look at Virgil van Dijk and the quality of the defenders around him and say, what the hell is going on with the four defenders? We've gone over the midfield a lot. And there is a large element of culpability in our midfield setup. But at the same time, a good back four will save a bad midfield an awful lot of the time. Virgil van Dijk, to me, seems like he's missing the leadership qualities we've known him for, and certainly the physical qualities we've known him for, and nobody has stepped up to take that role. Is it maybe time to give up on the Joe Gomez project, give up on the Matip quality of bringing the ball out the back, and maybe also give up on Virgil van Dijk being our talisman defender?
Yeah. Well, I'll address all three of those guys in kind of quick succession. No, I don't think it's time to give up on Verge. I think it's a guy that's as much as we wanted him to come back from injury and immediately just be back to his stoic self. I don't think that was a reasonable ask in this day and age, especially with our training staff who don't get people back in the 100% is a fallacy with this club these days. Nobody comes back from an injury. You're always kind of looking at when that next shoe is going to drop with a guy coming back, which is why all the people coming back from the front line scares the shit out of me that Diaz is going to come back and like the next day that he's out for 2 months. But that's an entirely different thing. I'm going off track. Matip, the days of him going on an adventure probably need to come to a close because those were based on having a strong midfield, which is no longer the case. And the fact that he still tries to do all of that in an attacking sense where it leaves so much vulnerability and there's no awareness that, hey, you don't have that luxury anymore. Probably don't do that. Is a knock on him. And Gomez, yeah, he is the absolute biggest defensive punching bag that we have. He's a guy that 1 week can look just the future, and next week absolutely look like a guy that should be playing in League One. I don't, and not League Un, I mean League One, and that inconsistency with Gomez and his mistakes always come at the absolute worst time. Yeah, if you give up a goal in like the 8th minute, or you get beat and you're in the wrong position, yeah, those are things that people can kind of let go. But when you're consistently getting beat for winners and equalizers, and you're giving up the ball in just like stoppage time, or all of the things that he does on a regular basis, there has to come a point where, fuck it, throw Nat Phillips out there. What harm can it do? What is he going to be the same bad as Gomez? Romney's talking about the devil you know versus the devil you don't. I'll take the fucking devil I don't on that front because I've seen the devil I know and he keeps fucking killing me. I don't want to die anymore.
Rami, we in a clever pun style, we talk about building from the back with the ball in play, but we need to almost, as much as we talk about the midfield, does it seem like we need to build from the back in terms of our next phase of recruitment, and get either somebody who can eventually replace Virgil with Konate beside him, or maybe something a bit different formationally, maybe a back three to allow Trent to become a proper wing back, which might alleviate the midfield issues. Or are we stuck with what we have for the next few years, and we're going to be having this conversation a year from now and 2 years from now because we haven't fixed areas of the field that need to be fixed?
Yeah, I think we just let the midfield issue linger for far too long, and now it's gotten to the point where now the midfield and the defense are an issue. And my biggest fear is, like you said, that this coming summer we address the midfield, and we're sitting here next summer being like, why don't we address the defense too? Like you said, I think Joe Gomez, when he was young, he had a lot of those glimpses. I remember in the 1920 season when we won the Premier League title, him and Van Dijk, that looked like our partnership for the future. but he's had some injuries since then. I think that's a fair disclaimer. I won't hold that against him, but I think it's fair to say that he's not at Liverpool's quality anymore. Joel Matip, he's aging. He's aging. He still did have those mistakes in him, but yeah, he's aging. He's not the player he used to be. I think Konate and Van Dijk are good enough for now, but like you said, we need to start being proactive and looking towards the future. Who's going to be Konate's partner in the future? And when we eventually move Van Dijk to like a third choice, maybe, or maybe we bring in 2 players this year and Matip becomes a fifth choice guy, and he's like a coach basically. He's just around for the good vibes and energy and stuff like that, and move Gomez on. It's either way though, it's going to take some investment, and that's the biggest concern. Like I said, we let the midfield rot for 2 or 3 seasons now. We haven't signed a first team midfielder other than Thiago since I think 2018, which was Fabinho. We just let that issue get rot too much, so now it became the issue with the midfield, and we started refresh with Konate and then just stopped. Didn't bring anybody else in. I like, people are linking us to Gvardiol from Leipzig, the Croatian defender. I think he'd be a great fit, but expecting us to pay 90 million for a guy who for now is going to be essentially our third choice is kind of expecting a bit much. So yeah, I personally agree. I think we need to start looking at rebuilding that defense. Van Dijk, like you said, he's only getting older, and he's still good. He was just really good before he got injured, and he hasn't reached those peaks yet. But he's still really good. It's just not as good as he used to be. And he's, like I say, he's getting older. He's getting slower. So we do need a bit of a succession plan after Van Dijk. So yeah, I think Konate, like I said, is the future of this defense. We just need to start figuring out who's going to be that guy next to him.
Trevor, let me throw a wild one at you. Is it possible that it's a solution to drop Fabinho back into becoming a proper out-and-out central defender and then fix the midfield from there? Or is he also shot as part of the defensive malaise that we've seen this season?
Well, he was originally brought in from Monaco as a right back, and then Trent's emergence really forced him into that defensive midfielder role. And he had spots where he could fill in at central defense, and he was confident at it. But now I think his confidence is so shot, even with the past couple of games where he was able to kind of build himself out a little bit more. And we talked after the Newcastle game, when I wasn't kind of going through the quantum realm of him being a guy where everybody else was kind of working around him, and he was still in his I need to bitch about everything mode. I wouldn't feel super confident with him as that second half of the partnership, but yeah, if he's your kind of emergency guy, I'm cool with that. But no, I'd rather there be somebody more steadfast than him there.
So it seems the question it's pretty much open-ended. We need to fix the midfield and we need to fix the defense somehow. It seems like a big ask, and it's surely going to be a subject we're going to talk about again. But let's move on from the present and get to the future. We have a game coming up, as always. It's never ending, no matter what time of year we're in. It's never ending. We have Crystal Palace, the Crystal Map, because we've said this weeks and weeks and weeks ago, but now it's actually true. We need the points, don't we, Rami? It's now crunch time for points on the board.
Yeah, we're starting to run out of opportunities to start working our way up the table. We're 2 wins on the bounce in the Premier League, 2 clean sheets. So, that's a promising sign. But like you said, there's only so many points to play for. The only reason we're even still in the race is, everybody else around us is just as incompetent as us, if not more. So that's the only reason why we're still even in the top 4 race. But you're 100% correct. If we want to get something started of this season, it starts now. Crystal Palace, the first game, that's the Darwin Nunez header game, all of that. So it's a little bit, we can't use much from that game, I feel like, but we still had to put in a good performance. I feel like we still could have won that game. But given our away form this season, that's probably the most concerning thing for me. I think we've won 2 or 3 away games all year. So going away there, it's just going to be tough for sure. But if we can come away with 3 points, and we win our game in hand on Wednesday, we're going to be, I think, 2 points out of top 4, which is crazy considering where we were, just a month ago. So, like you said, we are running out of time, but I feel like we're still in a situation where if we just, take things one game at a time, we can still do this, I believe.
Trevor, we've had this conversation before on the Thursday podcast about, we need to put points on the board, and now it is coming to the crunch. There's 16 games left in the season. We're over the halfway point, but we're not consistent enough to go into this game with any confidence, are we?
No, and especially coming off the Champions League game, because we've always tried to been finding that corner to turn where in past seasons there's always been that bad result that kind of rears its ugly head, and you go, okay, now we're gonna bounce back from this, turn the corner, and be fine. And this year, whenever those bad results come, it just makes a snowball effect. It's led to 2 or 3 just really rough games on the trot. And Crystal Palace is a team that has always, in the past few seasons, just kind of not necessarily been a bogey team, but a team that just gives you more trouble than they should. And the game that Rami referenced earlier with the Nunez giving the old headbutt to Anderson was just another one in the long line of just garbage. Go back to Dwight Gale, all of that nonsense with Palace in the past. Yeah, I really hope that now that we have kind of the Champions League on the back burner, because that kind of seemed to be our glimmer of hope for the season. Now that we're kind of moving up the table, I hope that top 4 has usurped the Champions League as our glimmer of hope, and kind of focusing on that and really going into this Palace game knowing that, yeah, a draw ain't going to cut it. We have to go there and we have to win.
Rami, on the Discord channel after the Real Madrid game, which everybody should be on, I said that the mentality monsters are now gone. That they're dead. It doesn't exist right now. It needs to be rebuilt. You would almost usually think after a result on Tuesday that the team they'll want to come out on the weekend again. They want to get something back. They have that bit of pride and etc. etc. But there's no indication that that's going to happen this week for this game from this group this year, is there?
Yeah, like you said, they've went from mentality monsters to mentality, I don't know, minnows. I can't think of another word, but yeah, it's very disheartening because
go with the alliteration. You're on it.
Yeah, thank you. We like you mentioned, we had I can think of 4 or 5 instances this season where it's like, okay, we finally turned the corner. Bournemouth beating them 9-0. It's like after we had just lost to United. It's like, okay, yeah, finally a response. And then I think we lost. Oh no, then we beat Newcastle, but then like 2 wins on the bounce, and then we went and lost on the weekend or tied with Everton. I can't remember. Same thing. There's been a lot of instances like we beat City, and then the next week we lost to Leeds United at home. Just instances like that where it's like we look like we turn a corner and we just come out and crumble. I'm still waiting to see that response you talk about. Every time I watch this team, they just look more and more defeated, more and more lacking confidence. Yeah, we have glimpses and here and there. And Nunez, I'll be honest, is one of the bright spots where I don't feel like he's been affected, but that's probably because he's new and stuff. But they just look more and more defeated. And I don't know. I think it does come down to confidence. I think once they can just start winning games dominantly, not like, Everton and Newcastle, you can make the argument, we were lucky to get 3 points. You can make that argument. I don't believe it, but you can make that argument. Once we start getting wins, putting 3 or 4 wins together that were dominant wins, then we can start getting that confidence back. But as someone mentioned in the chat, I don't see that happening. I don't see us getting 4 or 5 wins in a row like we could have in the past. I'm actually very nervous for this game on Saturday with it being away. I'm trying to stay optimistic about it, but it is concerning that, every time we're expecting a response from this team, every time we think we've turned the corner, they just crumble and look defeated again. So that's what I think they need to sort out by the end of the year.
Trevor, How would you? I mean, it looks to me like, and we said this last week. Gakpo and Nunes seem to be settling in nicely now, and like just at the right time. But there's obviously issues in other areas of the field. Given that we don't play Madrid again for another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, for that return leg, yeah. So how would you go in this game? Would you go strong, and would you even maybe play the same team to see what they're made of in terms of the good old gorilla monsoon intestinal fortitude, or would you change it up and say, guys, that wasn't good enough, and now we're going to start plugging other people in?
I think this is a game that needs a Thiago intervention. That would probably be the one guy that I get in there. Who he comes in for, pick your poison. Take one of those midfield three out. It doesn't really bother me which one makes way. I think Thiago's just a guy with Crystal Palace, a team that really tries to be disruptive in the midfield and get those guys with pace out. A guy with Thiago that can kind of slow things down. As much as I hate it in a lot of other instances, with a team like Palace, I kind of think it's a necessary evil. That's the only change I'd make, is I'd get Thiago in, even if it's for a half, even if it's for 45 minutes, kind of control the first half, hopefully get a well-crafted goal out of it, and then kind of just go from there. But then that strategy doesn't always bear the most ripe of fruit this season.
Rami, a diversion of sorts, and possibly a controversial one, given that he shipped 5 goals. Do we maybe put Kelleher in there? Or do we stick with Alisson?
No, we stick with Alisson. Alisson's the reason we're not 14th in the league right now. He's he made a mistake against Real Madrid, and I'll be honest, that's been an issue with Alisson. I'm not gonna lie, he does have those in him. I remember the City game during the pandemic where he had like 2 or 3 in the same game. But I stick by Alisson no matter what. I think Kelleher is solid. He's a good backup option, but the 5 goals weren't on him. Only one of them was, realistically, and it could have been worse. He had a few saves in that game that did help us, especially early on when we were still leading. But yeah, look at the Newcastle game. If it weren't for him, we dropped points in that game. We need Alisson. That's just a realistic thing. He's like I said, if it weren't for him, we would be in a much worse position. So I think we have to stick by him and look at everybody else first before we look at Alisson.
Trevor, before we go, what do you have a score prediction for this game?
Oh God, really? I'm gonna. You know what? As much as it pains my soul to continue to be optimistic, 1-0. Just fuck it, 1-0. That's all I got.
Do you have a score prediction for the game?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have a bad feeling about this game, but I had a good feeling before Madrid, so take that for what it's worth. I'll take a tie. I'll take a draw at this point. I think away at Crystal Palace. My prediction is maybe 2-2, hopefully. Maybe 1-0, like Trevor said. Get the 3 points and run. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm hoping for.
I'm gonna book the trend and balance it all out. I'm gonna say we lose at 3-2.
Okay.
Double jinx. That's how I'm going to put it. Now, just before we go, we normally do a threshold question, a nice little silly question or philosophical paradox to lighten the mood after the depressing talk we've had for Liverpool's performances this season. But in the last few weeks, we've kind of had a worldwide, globally relevant incident that just shows that ultimately everything we talk about is just about a game. It's not hugely important in the great scheme of things. And the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, it kind of hits close to home with American Scouser TV, with Timuchin, with Jamie. And the website will be doing some things, some fundraising things to get some whatever we can do, aid and relief to the affected regions. So if you follow us on Facebook, if you follow us on Discord, if you follow us on Instagram or Twitter, keep an eye out for that, and help if you can, because every little does help in times like these. And then to do that, make sure you're subscribed and make sure you're following us and liking and everything so you get those notifications. But ultimately, Rami and Trevor, it is just a game, really, isn't it? As much as we would like to get worked up about it. So, just remains to say for us, the Fantasy Football League, not to end on a complete downer, but the Fantasy Football League show is on right after us, and where you can also be depressed like I am about how poorly you're doing. Or if you're Gally's wife, I think, doing really well, I believe. I'm not sure. She was at the start for sure.
Deal with your doubles and your blanks.
I'm, as I said before the broadcast, 247 out of 240, probably. I haven't changed my team in months. But yes, like us, subscribe us for all the good stuff and all the serious stuff as well, as we just mentioned. Follow us on Spotify. Join the Discord channel. You can see my fantastic. Gally dropped the spot. Oh, that should be on the news tomorrow. That should be on the Today Show tomorrow morning when I wake up. Gally,
DJ, be sure to come back with that in about 13 minutes.
Yes, be sure to come back with that in about 30 minutes. But yes, there's no morning coffee tomorrow. Maybe pre and post match stuff on Saturday. And we will be back to the Monday podcast and the Thursday podcast and the Monday, the morning coffees next week to normal. Just remains for me to say thank you to Rami for joining us today, and thank you to Trevor for joining us tonight. Hopefully, my prediction is double jinx. That's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping that I'm balancing out everybody else's positivity. And we will see everybody next week, and hopefully, we will have smiles on our faces. So just remains to say thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Rami. And peace out to everybody else.
Thank you. See you.